Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. It's a pleasure to have you. And today we go back to the basics. The first thing I think we should say the first thing. One of the first things that we began and we constantly do before every new Masechta, Rabbi Brut takes us through history of some of the Svarim that have been written, Rishonim, Achronim, on the upcoming Masechta, and usually highlights a couple of personalities for us. So that's what we're doing. We're about to start Masechtas Kidushin, one of the classic yeshiva Masechtas, with, I'm sure, unlimited amount of Svarim and Shiurim available on the Masechta. But we leave it to Rabbi Brut to Kleib Ois, as they say in Yiddish, to choose for us some of the more interesting ones, some of the fascinating Svarim that are out there. Rabbi Brut's laughing. Maybe we should have like a couple of Yiddish words thrown in every episode to focus on. We'll learn Yiddish that way. Either way, this episode is been sponsored. This one is not anonymous. It is in memory of Moshe ben Eliyahu and Aaron ben Eliyahu. And we hope that the learning, the Torah knowledge that comes out of this episode should be an Eloi for their neshama. Rabbi Brut, take it away.
Okay. So we're ending Seder Nashim, Masechtas Kedushin, which is interesting. Why is it all the way at the end? So it's not clear how it got put at the end, why it's at the end. I came across a work. It's called Mechkarim b'Masechtas Kedushin l'Or HaGirsois b'Kisfei Yad v'Rishayim. It's found on Eitzar Chachma, and he has a whole chapter listing out where in the order. Let's say the Rambam, how he has this the Masechtas and all the different Rishayim that he was able to collect, where he deals with this, trying to figure out how this happened. And this is a question that's a known question. Now, we just throw that out always in the beginning, sometime where the frame of the Masechta is in the particular Seder. Now, the Nusach of the Talmud, so for the manuscripts and all that type of stuff, we have 4 volumes from Mechon Talmud Yisraeli, on Masechtas Kedushin. For Mishnayos, we have the Safrai Mishnayos we mentioned in the past. Now, just to briefly mention for Yerushalmi, Masechtas Kedushin, we have an amazing tool from Dr. Menachem Katz, where basically he started in his doctorate, where he did a one parak, but he ends up publishing a few years back the whole Yerushalmi based on manuscripts, and more importantly, all the nuschais found in the different Rishonim that he collected from all over, continuing the credible work from Ber Retner, Avasim Yerushalayim, finding more stuff based on the card catalogs of Mechoner of Herzog and Professor Yaakov Zussman. So this is available for purchase by Mechon Ben Tzvi. On Tosefta, we have Shaul Lieberman. Okay, so those are the early materials. Now we go a little later, the Gainim. So we have the Eitzer Gainim from Bam Levine, we've mentioned in the past, whenever it's available. Now, just to point out one Yediyah, because it affects the beginning of Kedushin, a lot of Rishonim bring this down already, is that Roshiri Gain says in the famous letter of his that the first blot or first 2 blot of the Masechta is from the Rabbanan Savarai. Rishonim deal with this. It's brought down in a lot of different Makairos for this. One could see Rav Leiter in his Mitaras and Shal Rishonim has some material about it already. The Minchas Yehuda, which we've quoted in the past, a Talmud of Elazhin, and a Chavrusa and Talmud of the Nachas David. We mentioned this also briefly. And again, in this Chibur, Mechkarim b'Masechtas Kedushin, he has a whole arichos about it, discussing the material about it. Now, if one wants to understand Rabbanan Savarai in the Gemara, so this Bam Levine, Binyamin Moshe Levine, has a chibur about Rabbanan Savarai. There's other works about it, but the chibur of Bam Levine could be found on Hebrew books. Okay, now that's Gainim. Now we go a little further. Rabbeinu Chananel. So in a lot of Masechtas we have on the Shas Vilna, you look on the side. Over here, it's not. We'll get to what's on the side shortly, but the starting of collecting of material from manuscripts was again Bam Levine. He puts it in his Eitzer Gainim. Continued with this with more materials as Rav Bloy in his famous set of Rishonim on the Masechtas, and then more recently the Kovetz Oil Chia has a bunch of more pieces which they claim they have discovered. Okay, so this is getting us closer. Now we're going to Rashi. So Rashi, as far as we know, Rashi on this Masechta is Rashi. We've discussed in the past on different Masechtas, if it's Rashi, it's not Rashi. Okay. The Kitzer, in 1977, Professor Kufafer, Talmud of Ram Shik happens to be, worked in Hebrew University. He finds in Madrid what seems to be labeled Rashi from on the last few blot of the Masechta. And it's not the same as what we have. Anyway, the question is it really Rashi? It seems that there are some Rishonim that also have these materials and they call it Rashi. Anyway, he deals with it. It seems it's not Rashi, but it's definitely a real Rishon, early on Rishon, maybe possibly from the base Medrash of Rashi, maybe a little later. Anyway, I came across a few years ago a work found on Eitzar Chachma, which redoes the work of Kofafer and more, because it seems they have a better manuscript, and it seems it's a Rishon. The question is who it is, but the name is Ramrug. It could be one of three different people, and this person put out a much more extensive edition. I tried to make inquiries to purchase it, to find it as a hard copy. It seems it did come out, can't find it, but on Eitzar Chachma the work exists. Anyway, one other thing to mention with Rashi is a point that we mentioned in Reb Chaim Kanievsky Shiur and briefly and other times is Rashi a lot of times deals with the Girsais of the Gemara, and he has a lot of Hachigar Sinans, and we explained a little bit where that's coming from. Really, Rashi saw a manuscript, he's fixing it or whatever. How is he doing this? So a work was done in Bar Ilan dealing with Rashi specifically on Masechtas Kidushin, what the Hachigar Sinan stories of Rashi in this Masechta. And again, if you go back to Eitzer Gainim of Bam Levine, he has found that a lot of times, if you go back to Gainic literature, you can understand the Girsais of Rashi. Okay, these are the boring typical details for most people on the Masechta. Now we go on to more practical. A lot of times, and we're talking about the Rishonim. So a lot of times I quote is that the Chida, who we have discussed also, saw a lot of Rishonim that people up to his time did not see in his travels. We mentioned that in the episodes of Chaim Kanievsky a little bit also. So he talks about Masechta, he has a listing of the different Rishonim that he saw or is aware of on the Masechta. So Kedushin, for him, he has listing the Ramban, the Rashba, the Taisis Rid, and the Ritva. 4 Rishonim. Okay, so that's nice. But the question is that really, and anyone who knows today what's going on, it's incredible, the scene of the Rishonim alone on the Masechta. And let's begin briefly. We're not going to go into every single Rishon, but we're just going to mention briefly like this. First, Taisis. So we have Taisis Rosh, Taisis Rid, that the Chida mentions. Okay, then there's a Taisis Tuch that comes out, which caused a whole discussion. What is the Taisis Tuch? Where is it coming from? We're not going to get into this, but there's an article in the journal Chitzig Bayern from where someone deals with Barichos about the Taisis Tuch. And in English, there's a doctor from a fellow Ram in Shalavim, Reb Ari Leibowitz, who has a doctorate and a bunch of articles in Hachakira journal all about Taisis Tuch and its role in the Taisvis on Shas that we have. Now, Taisis and Shas, early, without going through the whole history of the Taisvis and the generations and all the different people and what's happening in Taisis, which obviously the starting point is Ephraim Orbach's classic work, Balia Taisvis, which is in multiple editions. But one of the main early Rishonim is Taisis Shantz. Lamashal the Shem Agdolim in his entry he talks about Taisis Shantz. He says it's a Taisis Shechibar Rabbeinu Shimshin Bar Avram Mishantz Talmud Ri Bal HaTaisvis. Balatoisis is the first generation Balatoisis. Then he says what happened. Achrav ba Rabbeinu Eliezer Mituch, the Katzrim, he made it short. And not only him, other Rishonim, that's what they did. They had a longer Taisis, and now we know this because we have Lamashal, we pointed out by Masechtas Ksuvis, Taisis Shantz is humongous if you compare it to the Taisis on the page. Now, a lot of times the length helps because a lot of times what happened is certain pieces, critical pieces, even words are removed, and that helps. Well, that makes all the difference in understanding the Taisis. Anyway, a fellow, we've quoted him in the past a bunch of episodes, Rabbi Aaron Gabbai, a young Kaila guy. He has collected numerous pieces that were never published before from Taisis Shantz on the Masechta and Yerusha Seinu. I could send if someone wants the article, I could send it a PDF. Now, this is in general a point just to mention briefly. It's a sad thing that Baruch Hashem, we live in a generation that the Rishonim, as we're going to continue seeing now, and even Achrayim, it's incredible what's out there, and there's no real listing of all the Rishonim that there are in each Masechta or Achrayim. Achrayim, there's mamish nothing. Rishonim, there was an attempt, Menachem Kasher did a few times, called Sari HaElef, where he listed out all the different Rishonim that were published, but his work ends in 1984. Now, what he also did, which is significant, is, let's say there was an article printed in a journal. The Ma'ariya, someone discovered 5 blot of a particular Rishon on Masechtas Kedushin. So he would try to incorporate it into his thing. But there's been, from 1984 till today, is a long time, a ton of material. There's no way to keep track. There's been attempts, but it's a work that needs to be done by and let out there. So Lamashal, this Taisa Shans that he discovered from various places, if you don't happen to know that it's in the Yerusha Seinu, it's going to be lost. Okay, we're pointing that out over here. Now, in general, over there in this article, what's also interesting is he talks about the significance of the various taisasin that exist on Masechtas Kedushin, and Bechlal gives you a few pages of information, very interesting information about Taisis Shans and the Taisis Bechlal and Shas. Okay, now once you're talking about taisis, so if you look on the side of your Gemara, Kedushin, it says Taisis Riyazaki. So it's Yadua and the Welt in the Yeshiva Shevelt that Rebbe Chanan already said that it's not Riyah Zaking. And so who is it? So it's been proven by Ramesh Blai in 1962, maybe even earlier, that it's Rebbe Avram Nahar. So the point is, it's a real reliable Rishon. It's just not as early. It's a little later. Okay. So at this point, we could see that there's a lot of Rishonim out there already, and we didn't even scratch the surface. All of a sudden, we now know we have the Ramban, Rajma, and Ritva. Okay, as I've pointed out in the past, we're not going to go into this barichos, but these materials only come available later on. What I mean to say is, Ramban is 1759, the Rajma is 1717, the Ritva is in 1715, but it's not complete. So what the point that I try to make in all the different episodes of these shiurim is that the Achronim did not really have the Rishonim. We, in our generation, we are Zeicha. When you walk into a standard shul, many people in their standard homes have so many Rishonim that the Gedolei Achronim did not have and would have wished and loved to have. And we should take advantage of it. Anyway, the Ritva, so in 2012, a Madura Basra of the Ritva came out from Meiser of Kook. The question is if it's really a Madura Basra of the Ritva. It seems that it's not, but okay. Now, another early Rishon from this base medrash that has come out in 1904 is the Ra'ah. So we know a lot of Masechtas, they have a Ra'ah, but according to Bam Levine, this is definitely not a Ra'ah, it's a late Achron. Gabbai, in an article, which I'm going to talk about momentarily, he seems to say it's probably someone from the early Achronim. Okay, it could be, I don't know what Bam Levine was basing it on, or what Gabbai is basing each one, what they're basing it on. Anyway, we have another work that is connected to the Beis Medrash, the Ramban, published in 1972 from Reb David Tzvi Hillman, a famous Talmud Chacham from Bnei Brak, called Shitas Kadmonius. It's available on Hebrew books. Okay, now of course there's also the Meiri, the Rimalunal, and all various other Rishonim. We're not going to highlight all of them, just to mention three more Rishonim, and that is as follows. We mentioned in the past, one of the machons that gets major akaras atayiv for what it's been doing for the world of Rishonim and even a little bit for Achronim is Machon Ofek from Rabbi Avram Shoshana. So in this Masechta Kedushin, he's done incredible work. Lamashal, in 1995, he puts out the Yad Ramah. Ramah is one early Rishon, dies in 1245. Everyone knows in Sanhedrin, he's unbelievable. And Bechlal, whenever you have the Ramah, people, it's well known, those that are Isaac and Rishayim, this is one very special Rishon. And through a whole introduction at great length, how he concludes that it is the Ramah, and it seems it really is the Ramah. He proves that this is the Ramah, and he deals with the significance of it, including for the Nuschais of the Talmud. He does, interestingly enough, in this introduction, he's been accused, I would say, sometimes for having too long of footnotes in his various works that he puts out, but in the Ramah and also in the next work, which we're going to mention, he tries to excuse himself that over here it's very important because it's so significant and Kedushin so negeya, so he's justifying why he has lengthy footnotes, but he's trying to stick straight to the topic. Okay. Fine. Another work that he publishes, two massive volumes, is called Arganus. So this work first comes out in 1999, based on a Ksavia they discover in the Ginsburg collection. That's its own interesting story, but he doesn't have the name of this Rishon. However, through incredible research, he's able to prove the following. It's been claimed by people. I have not been able to, I don't know offhand who's the source for such a claim, but the claim has been that the Ran, on every Masechta, has a Rishon that he feels is the go-to Rishon of the said Masechta, and that's what he uses to go build off on his on particular Masechta. So for Kedushin, Rabbi Shoshana was able to document that this work, who we don't know who it is the what the Ran used for his work extensively. It seems it might have even been a Rebbe of the Ran. and that's why he doesn't have his name mentioned in it. This is a very tough question when we were trying to understand the concept of Mevi Davar B'Shem Amrei, a concept all over in the Rishonim where we do not find a lot of times we don't find them mentioning where they're getting concepts from, and it could be a Rashi, could say not once that they're taking a concept from Rashi. It could be they could take hundreds of concepts from Rashi and they'll barely ever mention it in the Sefer that they're using Rashi for, say. But it could be much more blatant. What today would be called plagiarism, in the times of Rishonim, it's clear they didn't hold there was an issue. Maybe this is a question and a topic that needs to be explored fully and has not yet been properly explored. But it seems Rav Shoshana, when relating to the Ran, got in trouble for this. People were upset, so to speak, but he defends himself very well. And Reb Shlomo Zalman Hevlin in an article in Yeshurun also that this is accepted with the Ran, such a nakuda. Okay, now another piece of information that's found in this Arganos is a work from Baruch Meganetzia. So this is an early Rishon who seems to die around 1220. This is a Rishon that Professor Simcha Emanuel has done a lot of work in trying to locate his writings, and over here Shoshana has him write the introduction part about him in this volume Arganos, and there's also a manuscript from relating to a Parish on the Rush. Also, so it's two massive volumes, a ton of information on Rishonim, all published by Rav Shoshana.
Just to stop you for a second so you can catch your breath, as you were speeding through what you're talking about, you mentioned this idea of Rishonim quoting concepts from Rashi and what we call quote-unquote plagiarism, and we see that Rishonim did it. It hasn't been fully explored. Maybe you want to spend a minute or two, just to talk about what you mean, an example. I think it's important for people to hear this and to know.
Okay, so I'll explain to what I mean. Okay, very like this. There are Rishonim. Let's say one is learning this. A good example will be as follows. There's a Sefer, one of the most famous works on davening and on a lot of topics related to Archaim, is called Avudraham. Very, very important work, printed numerous times, numerous editions. Now, this work is not only himself, there is stuff from himself, but he also is malake from a lot of different places. But you can find certain points. Let's say he's talking about Pirish of Prakim and Tehillim, when he's talking about Psukah de Zimra, literally could be a few pages where it's taken from a Rishon from a few generations before him, such as specifically the Malmid HaTalmidim, Rabbi Yaakov Antuli, a famous Rishon. Today we don't know much about. He's not commonly heard. You don't hear about him so much, but he had this work. How do we know? Very simple. Avraham is much later. We compare. You just take 10 pages and you compare, and you could see almost everything is there. So now you would think he should say, these next 10 pages, I'm using Rabbi Yaakov Antuli's work, let's say. And he doesn't do it. Now, it could be Rabbi Yaakov Antuli might be a bad example, because it could be Rabbi Yaakov Antuli sometimes he does mention, so he just doesn't mention him every time. That's another concept in the story of what we call today plagiarism, but it's not really plagiarism, but we're not going to go into it right now. But that's the idea. We find Rishonim, they're really using the Ramban, the Rit for the Rajma, and they don't say that they're using the Rit for the Ramban and Rajma. Now, it could be because everyone knew they were Talmidim of that base medrash. They weren't writing it for the public. There could be all different types of mahalchim to explain it, but that's somewhat of a 1 or 2 minute brief thing to answer your question. Okay, now just to illustrate this with the last sefer of the Rishonim that we'll deal with is the Shita Lo Nidei. Everyone in Yeshiva you always come across there's a sefer called Shita Lo Nidei. We don't even know who he is. Anyway, we have like this. It's published early on and doesn't have a name. So, okay, but Lamaisa, interestingly enough, Meir Ben Ayo wrote an article, and Kedarkai, he's able to, with his incredible yediyas and bibliographical skills, he deals with the chashivas of this work, and he basically shows that the Rebbe Tzal Ashkenazi had the work, that's the author of the Shittim Gobetzes, who was a tremendous yadin and svarim, because we know he an expert in Rishonim, because one of the things he was doing was collecting a lot of things in Rishonim, and he says he's a bendar of the Rajba. So he basically says like this: if Rebbe Tzal Ashkenazi says he's bendar of the Rajba, you could be sure he knew what he was talking about. So like this, I wanted to say ha'ara is that Bam Levine, when he's using different sources for his sefer, he says that he's not going to use this work because it's late and he's not sure the origins. I think is that had he seen this article, B'nai, which only came out years later, then maybe he would have incorporated with it because it's an early work. So if there would be some early Gaonic work in such a material, in such a sefer, that the Rebbe Tzalish Kenazi authenticated, then maybe he would be more nachas to quote it. Okay, now just to conclude, Rabban Gabbai, and I've mentioned this in the past in a few other Masechtas, so he has an intense listing of Rishonim and information about the Rishonim on Masechtas Kedushin. If one wants to have a PDF of it, you can email me. I will be more than happy to send it to you. And there's a lot of interesting information about the Rishonim and details with manuscripts and all different things, different material, valuable information. Okay, that concludes the Rishonim part of the thing. Now we go on to Achronim. So Achronim, we'll try to go through this fast, is as follows. There's a Mari Rav. Mari Rav is active 1474, dies in 1546. Now, we spoke about him already on a little bit in the episode of the Nazir Shimshon controversy. We hope, Mirz Hashem, one day we'll get back to talking specifically about him, but right now, what's significant is like this. In 1663, that's a long time, over 100 years after he dies, a work of his on Kidushin comes out. We don't have a work of his on any other Masechtas. And it also has Chidushim of what's called the Talmud of the Rashba. So if you're already following, there's a lot of works that we don't know the names of the authors on this Masechta. I don't know why that is so. Maybe this is the unique thing to Masechtas Kedushin. I'm pretty sure it's not found in many other Masechtas. Now, and that causes a lot of times confusion, because you'll say, oh, Shita learned me, Shita are this. Okay, anyway, Bekitzer, so one of the Chashivasim, besides her being the Mari Rav, who's famous for a lot of different things, including the Smicha controversy, is that it has quotes from Rishonim. So it's important. It's not only what he has to say that's significant, but it's also that he has Messiahs of Rishonim. Okay. Now, interesting thing happens in 1926. The famous, at that time, book dealer Ramichal Rabinovich, a Litvak who made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, a big expert on Svarim. And Bekitzer, he buys a manuscript. At first, he didn't realize what it was, and then he chaps that this Mari Rav was missing more than half the work, and he by mistake discovered it in this thing that he bought by mistake. He didn't even realize the significance. It seems he bought it for a different reason. Anyway, in 1940, he come out another 40, 50 blot of this work in Sefer Yovel Chvoid Bam Levine, who we've mentioned a few times today, and Madura of Mechon Yerushalayim has a lot of has a fancy edition. All Masudar today you could buy the Mari Rav, and including the Chidushay Talmud Rashba. This fascinating base medrash, which has a tremendous impact on the Beis Yosef and the Dairis afterwards. So Chaim Dimitrovsky has an in-depth article on this base medrash. Okay, so this is basically the earliest. One of the early Achronim. Another early Achronim, which was only published for the first time in 1995, is the incredible Rebbe Eliezer Ashkenazi, Ben Daireh of the Ramah Beis Yosef, considered one of the Gedolei Hadar of that time. Maybe one day we'll discuss him, Barichos, a specific episode just about him. But I sadly forgot to mention in the episode of the Get of Tamari that he was also involved trying to make Shalom. Okay, so, but the thing is, this work, even though he dies in 1586, he's quite early, but only in 1995, we're pretty sure that the work that they publish is from this Rebbe Eliezer Ashkenazi. Another early work from someone a drop older than the Rebbe Eliezer Ashkenazi is the Yam Shel Shloima. So the Yam Shel Shloima, sadly, we've mentioned this numerous times, even though he dies in 1573, it takes till 1766 for it to be published. Why that is, it's a story one day I will discuss.
Do you mind, when you mention the previous Achronim that you mentioned and the one that you go further, briefly describe what type of sefer they are, what type of pirush they are?
So I really would. The reason why I'm not going to is it's basically I'm going to use words that each word I'm going to have to. It's like, let's say, I'll give you an example. If I go over to a guy and I say, what does the word yeshivish mean? Okay, what happens? You get 7 different. You could get 10. You could take a poll on Twitter and ask the various Twitter people to do it. You'll see. You'll get. So if I'm going to use the word, it's pilpul. Let's say. So I'm going to say, what does pilpul mean? And it's taka. Worthy episode of 6 episodes to finally discuss what is the word pilpul means. I'm going to say it's pilpul. You say, that means it's Hungarian pilpul. No, it's not Hungarian pilpul. It's before Hungarian people even came to exist. So that's why I don't like to be magder so much what it is. But the Yam Shel Shloima, it's kedai to sit and use Even though Kedushin, it's ironic. He says Yavamis, he's Meirich. Ksuvis, he's Meirich. He spent a long time with Kedushin, he's not Meirich. And you'll see his not Meirich, especially if you compare it. He's the second generation, basically, of the Achroinim compared to Rishainim. It's unbelievable. But anyway, Masechtas Kedushin, it's very halachic oriented. It's a very kedai chibur to give a look, even when you're not learning so be'iyun. But we don't have it on that many Masechtas. The Masechtas that it is, the Marshal is one of the Gedolei Achroinim. And in my work, he had a tremendous impact on the Dairis afterwards, contrary to what other people believe, but that's not for now. Now, there's a statement, and this statement pretty much seems to be, he doesn't need any askamas, but he says it, and it seems to be true. They bring down from the Chazon Ish that the Achroinim on the Masechta of Kedushin is the following. One is the Atzmas Yosef, two is the Marit, and the three is the Makna or the Mikna, however you want to say it. Okay, so let's go through these. So the first work that really is published, it's published earlier than the Maribei Rav, and here I will give a Hagdara about what this work style is, based on not only because of your pointing it out, but you'll see why in a second. It's the Atzmas Yosef, or Yosef ibn Ezra. He's born in 1560, dies in 1620. It's published first in 1601. And it's published numerous times. In Ad Hayoim, in the Yeshivische Welt, you can find that you hear of it. Sadly, I will say as follows, that I went to go buy one a few weeks ago in a bunch of farm stores all over Yerushalayim. You can't get it anymore, which is a sad editorial. We're not going to go into this now, but it's a sad state of description of my opinion about the Svarim world of what's happening. Tons of Svarim are coming out, but the main Achron on the Masechta, you can't buy.
I don't know if this will make you feel better, but most people who are learning Masechtas Kiddushin and many of these other yeshiva Masechtas, it's in the Kevis Mefarshim. So is there even a clientele to buy the Atzmas Yosef as a standalone sefer?
So the answer is like this. Yes, it's in the Kevis Mefarshim. It definitely is. But the problem is like this. The Kevis Mefarshim, if one understands the history of the Kevis Mefarshim, which began way back till today you got to walk around with these monstrosities that weigh a few pounds. And the same hand, you're also carrying your Oizva Hada Gemara that also blossomed to a ton. And you want to sit and learn, and you're flipping back and forth, it makes it hard. Now, we're going to see why this plays out for that association. I'm not saying every Achron should be available, but the main Achrayim, you would hope it would. Now, it was recently reprinted in a few years back. Today, forget about it. So first of all, we said the Chazon Ish, but now I'm going to tell you something that I heard. So first, to mention, Yaakov Spiegel has a whole beautiful article write up about it in a Madura of the Chuvas of his that was collected. He also published a Chibur of his called Masa Melech, on Dina Misim and Mas, taxes and Minhagim, important work. These were published in recent years, reprinted. Now, when I was learning in the Mir, and this will get to relating to the style of this sefer. So I learned, one of the people I heard Shiurim say thereby was a Yid, Reb Meir Shmulevitz. Reb Meir Shmulevitz is the youngest son of Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. He's one of the known Iluyim already in Eretz Yisrael for years and years. He is one of the chief editors involved with Encyclopedia Talmudis and other things. So one time we learned Kedushin, and he somehow came up about the Atzmas Yosef. We learned the first parak. So those that are familiar or will be familiar shortly, a lot of the first parak has a lot of to deal with drushes. So it's not only concepts, but a lot of times it's a drusha. It learns out from psukim. So the Atzmas Yosef deals with a lot is to explain the drushes of Chazal, how Chazal sees the various things from the psukim. Now Taisus also deals with it when you learn the Taisusin, but when you tend to learn today in the Yeshiva Shevelt, many people, they don't focus so much on how the Gemara sees it from the psukim and the Alfusa. They're looking for the Lamda Shavart. So now he said like this. He said the Atzmas Yosef is famous. He said, this is going back 20 something years ago, and he said like this. Why is it famous? Because of the Lamda Shavarts that the Ksais or other people took from the Sefer. But most of the Sefer proportionally deals with the technicalities, Pashib Shat, being oimid on every single tag, Shabbatag of the Gemara to understand every single drasha. So he said that's how people used to learn. And he said it's not, people think, the Lamdas were Lamdanim. He said, no. People think it's a maila that we're much better than the earlier generations. He says we're so far lost that we have no shaykhs to what it's about. Anyone who learns Achrayim will see. Rebbe Kiveger, what's Rebbe Kiveger handling in, let's say, Masechtas Kedushin? He's handling these type of issues. Yes, he also will handle what the yeshiva world today is very into, but this is obviously a whole discussion of the Mahalach HaLimud as it evolved over the years. But the point is, the Atzmas Yosef has in it, yes, the Lamda Shavarts, but it also deals with very technical, explaining the Gemara Mamish, the Shakav Ataria, how the drushes work, how Chazal see what they see, all these things, how the Yugim Midas play out, and stuff like that. So it's a very, very important sefer on the Masechta. Okay. The next very important sefer, also on the list of the Chazon Ish, is the Marit. So we're not going to go into him. He was also a great giant in his time, Rabbi Yosef Tarani. And there's a fancy new edition of the Marit, published a bunch of years ago. Again, I went looking for it. You can't find it. So you'll say, yes, it's in the Kidushin Farshim, but this is a beautiful, beautiful edition with footnotes and everything on galore, including, I think, Ha'aras from Chaim Kanievsky, and a fancy introduction from my friend Tzvi Ler. Kids, you can't find it anymore. We're not going to go back to the discussing about the sad state of affairs of Svarim today. Now, Pnei Yeshua comes out afterwards, 1739. Alayoim, Pnei Yeshua doesn't need any Haskamas. There's a Sefer of Nasan Maz. Binyan Shloima comes out in 2011 from Ksav Yad. He's a Talmud of the Pnei Yeshua. He plays a major role in the Get of Cleves, which we hope to discuss in an episode soon. There's an early work, Elia Rabbah, 1768 is when it comes out, even though he died in 1712. This is the famous Elia Rabbah on Shulchan Aruch, Talmud of the Magen Avraham. Again, Tzvi Ler has an excellent article on him. Now, fast forward, there's a work called Atzei Arazim. Atzei Arazim is published in 1790. Reb Chaim Tzvi Berlin. The incredible chapter about this Yid can be found in the work of Yeshiva Harama B'Fiyarda. Yeshiva Harama B'Fiyarda is a work from Rav Shlomo Hammer of Bnei Brak, famous Yaki expert, Sharshim and Ashkenaz, and numerous other things. He has a massive chapter about this Goyin Olam Reb Chaim Tzvi Berlin, showing how everyone Mamish used them not once, not twice, hundreds of times. He has listings, and just the Mishnah Berurah mashal in this farm that are relating to the Mishnah Berurah. But it's an incredible arichos. Maybe one day we'll be zeicha to give a whole episode discussing this Goyin Olam that Reb Chaim Volozhiner. This is a person that's alive in the time of the Vilna Gaon. Reb Chaim Volozhiner writes about him unbelievable things. The Chassam Sofer quotes him dozens of times. Rabbi Akiva Eiger dozens of times. All this is documented by Hamburger. Okay. Anyway, then we have Reb Pinchas Halevi Horowitz Hamakna. So he dies in 1805. Before he dies, he publishes this work Hafla and Hamakna. These are, again, Chazon Ish also says it, but everyone knows these are part of the go-to svar on the Masechta. Anyone checking will find this. It's very easy. It also has a section about Halacha L'Maisa. I hope, Mir Hashem, to have an episode specifically devoting to him. Another contemporary is Sefer called Ar Chadash. Dies in 1799, Rebbe Eliezer Kalir. Also interesting chibur, tremendous askamas, and there's a whole work about him from Rabbi Seal Greenwald. I believe it's available on Hebrew Books, discussing about him, his generation, a lot of historical, interesting information, like Rabbi Seal Greenwald tends to write. Okay, Tyrus Gittin from the Nesivis, he does not write the Nesivis does not write a work on Hilchos Kidushin, but in his work, basic Kehelis Yaakov, it seems he started such a work. There's a bunch of different simonim, but he never completed it. Okay, now. There's a work called Pnei Moshe. He's a nephew and a Talmud of Rabbi Ephraim Zal Margolis. He seems to argue a lot with the Atzei Arazim, but that's not for now. Then there's Rabbi Yedidia Weil. We've spoken about him. He dies in 1805. He also, a work of his was published on manuscript. Okay, in recent years. Now we get to one of the greatest Yeshiva Achreinim, the Ksais, his work, the Avnei Miluim. It's published a little after he dies. He dies in 1812. I think it first comes out in 1815. Okay, now, many years ago, Rav Hershel Schachter began giving a shiur in Flatbush on Monday nights or Tuesday nights about Masechtas. And so at that time, it started was with Masechtas Kidushin. So I heard a few of the shiurim, and one of the shiurim he began. So he quotes Avnei Miluim, and he said an interesting yediyah that stuck with me already from then. I was in 10th grade at the time. He said that Hasidim don't like to use the Avnei Miluim. They love the Ksais, they love Shmaitza, but the Avnei Miluim, they're more nervous. Why? Because Shir, his son-in-law, had to do with the work. And Taka, if you open up your Avnei Miluim, you'll see in Agdama, they give Hakar Satayv to Shir. Now, I just wanted to say one ha'ara about this, and that is as follows. Who is Shir? Shir was what's called a frum maskil, who ends up becoming the Rav of Prague. And he was prolific. He had tremendous arichas yamim, and there's a whole book recently came out, Mamash, dealing every aspect of his life. But I go to look there. I'm always very curious. Ever since I'm very young, I heard this Rav Hershel Schachter saying this statement. I wanted to know what was his relationship with the Sefer Ksais, and also did he have a relationship with his father? He's the son-in-law of the Ksais. So does he have a real relationship with him? Anyway, it's very hard to know, and I'll explain to you what I mean. When you look at the Sefer, you'll see the sons of the Ksais are involved in the publishing. They raise the funds, they work on it. They give Akaras Atayv to their brother-in-law, their young brother-in-law, who barely knew the Ksais. And at that time, there's no indication that he was a maskil. It seems he was a brilliant Eloi who married the Ksais' daughter, Saif Yamav of the Ksais. And basically he does help them, and they thank him for helping with the mafteches, and he has ha'aris in the bottom and different things. He found makairis and different things. One has to understand when putting out a safe in those days, especially a monumental work like this, it needed a lot of help. So they had him help. But if you look carefully at the whole Hagdama and the halach yelech of the whole sefer, the main person who did 90% of the work was a Talmud Muvak of the Ksais for years and years. Rav Inzal, his name was, and you could see it when you read it. He's the one who writes the whole introduction, he was a tremendous person. He was closer to Raphaim Zal Margolis, and he spent years learning with the Ksais. He's the one who did most of the work. So I wouldn't be so nervous, even if this story that Rav Shechter is saying was more b'derech tzachos, so to speak. I wouldn't be so nervous. First of all, this is Shir before he had anything that we know Shir's life. It's very, very well documented. It's well before he had anything to do with all this. And second of all, is the most of the work was done by this Tyra from Chashiv Gain Oilam Ravinzel Talmud Muvik of the Ksais. When it opens up the Anulum, you could see this. Okay. Now, just to finish this up, is like this. Zechen the Shleima, also the same generation, same there. He dies in 1839, but in 1877 is Kidushin are published. He's also one of these Gedalim that has a lot to do with Rabbi Kiveger, the Nesivis, and Chol Mishras Baron published a beautiful edition of it in more recent years. And there's a whole book about him. If someone wants a small little booklet about him, if one wants, I could send it to them if they email me. Now this is the last main work to mention is the Oil Avram from Avram Tiktin, another Yedid of the Rabbi Kiveger and others, only come down from manuscript a few years ago. I went looking for my copy this week. I cannot locate it in my Svarim right now, so I might have to buy another one. Anyway, Bekitzer, these are the main achronim that exist on the Masechta. Fast forward, you have Lamashal, the Netziv, Imran Misadah, Shiurim on the Masechta, and then you have Rabbi Yezechai Stern, who we spoke about in an episode that we hope to release soon, his Aris HaMasechtas Kedushin, from the side of his Gemara, it's housed in the Reichman, in Rabbi Reichman in Yerushalayim's collection. So it was published way back in a Sefer Zikaron called Divrei Menachem. So this is also gets into a different complaint of mine. Not only are Rishonim not available to know these things in weird journals, but Achronim forget about. So you can have a Gewaldige Chibur of some Achron buried in some kavitz and it's lost. Okay, so Eitzach Chachma helps a little bit for these types of things if one knows what they're looking for. Say that. I copied this and bound this way before Eitzach Chachma even thought about existing, so I didn't get it from Eitzach Chachma. Anyway, Rav Zev Leiter, Mitaras and Shal Rishonim, we mentioned this. Also incredible work on Masechta Kedushin. We mentioned it a little bit about Gittin Adkan, the Achronim on the Masechta. There's many more, but we're not going to. I hope people will be meichel me for the ones that I missed. Now Achronim we have. There's the Eitzim Mefarshei Talmud, endless volumes. We'll discuss that a little bit in a future episode a little bit. And there's a kavitz called Oyel Chia, which has a Velt of Rosh Hashiva tires. And there's other. Then, as you mentioned in the beginning, I went looking just to see how many Svarim there are in Masechtas Kedushin, Rosh Hashiva Svarim. There are hundreds, and not only Rosh Hashiva, it's crazy. It's one of these unbelievably geschmacka Masechtas, and that's how we'll conclude. We're going to run through this in a minute. Basically, this Masechta Kedushin has a lot of halacha things. So first, there's a chibur called Tzedek Kedushin Ve'erison of Rav Stern from Bnei Brak. He publishes stuff from Rishonim, but this is focusing on what's Kedushin about? Getting married. You see, the chasana has to take place. How all that stuff takes place. All the halachas, manuscripts of Rishonim, besides the standard Rishonim that he collected. Then there's an incredible work called Tzedek Kedushin Nisum from Aaron Freiman. It's available on Hebrew books. Mamish documents. It's written in 1943. Documents through all the tkufas, all the Rishonim, the Ga'ainim early on. Different areas you want to know how a chasana looked, what they did, all the different minhagim. If one's learning Masechtas Kedushin, this is an incredible historical work collecting from Makairis, Rishonim, Chuvas, and the like. There's a book on Minhagei Italia, a special academic work from Professor Weinstein. Okay, then let's go skip everything. There's a Sefer Shulchan Ezer, a nice, good Hamish work. I think it's Hungarian, but I forgot to check. Pull out my copy. I happen to love this work. Is everything one wants to know about chasanas and all the different types of heebie-jeebie questions that come up. You have Eidos L'Yisrael from the Baal Tzlusa Avram, also another incredible work. Rav Tovia Freund collected tons and tons of stuff from Reb Shlomo Zalman in one of his series on I think it's called Shami Simcha. Okay, these are the stuff related to the sugyas of Kidushin. And then to conclude, Masechtas Kidushin has millions of other sugyas. We can't even begin to list them. Sugyas and Shlichos, there's Chiburim Shleimim on it. Avadim, there's a ton of blood in Avadim. We have to mention a ganze Chibur on Masechtas Avadim from Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Available on Hebrew books. No excuses not to learn real Torah from Chaim Kanievsky. Sugi of Chadash is at the end of the first parak. There's another chibur, a whole story. It's a whole sugi. This is the sugi over here. The Limud Chos on Klal Yisrael is against a whole chiburim on this. There's Hilchas Yichud. That's how Masechtas Kedushin ends. The Sefer Dvar Halacha learned to the Rav Hurwitz, author of the Archas Rabbeinu, with the Stipler. And then to conclude, there's also Kibbur Avein. A few blot of that. We're going to discuss a little bit about that. But Shoshana, Ofek, Meir Sharm, and the last work is a likud called Hadras Kaidish, where they malakit from all different places, from Ritzi Pesach Frankel, his Tyrus on Nisuin, and etc., Mila Pidinaben, which actually plays out in this Masechta. So these are some of the materials that are available out there on Masechtas Kedushin. It's one Masechta that one could learn, and it's even as from what I was told, it's dafka picked in, let's say, Lakewood, eighth graders to learn it. It's easier. Okay, that's it. We'll conclude.
Absolutely amazing. Last I checked, 8th graders in Lakewood, even though my son is not yet in 8th grade, they learn Gittin and Bava Kama. I think Hakainis in the first parak of Gittin. I don't know.
Oh, they don't learn Kedushin.
By now there are dozens and dozens of meisters here, so maybe one of them learns Kedushin. I don't know. If I have to remember, I think learned Masechtas Makkos in 8th grade.
Oh, you learned Makkos, okay. I got it. My Avnei Malum, I think I got in 8th grade. I'm not sure.
I thought you were going to say you got Makkos in 8th grade.
Oh, I definitely did, but I learned Gittin in 8th grade.
Fascinating. Do you want to turn around and whip out a sefer to talk about today?
Yes, one thing, because it will relate to this thing. Okay. So we just mentioned Hilchas Kibbur Aveim. So just now came out a sefer. It's called, actually, I can't even pronounce it. Devadai Ruvain. I'm for sure saying it wrong.
Dudae Reuven, named after the Dudaim
from over there. Okay, whatever Dudae is, that's a different story. We're not going to go into right now. But it's on Hilchos Kibbur Aveim. It's what the fashion. We've spoken about this aspect actually, written like a Mishnah Berurah, where it has a Bir Halacha, a Shar Tzion, Be'iyun on Hilchos Kibbur Aveim, which is Siman Reish Mem Aleph in Shulchan Aruch Yeridea. Now he has here the following features. One is he has Psakim of Rabbi Yashiv, like many of the Heintige Svarim, Kavitz Chuvas of Chaim Kanievsky. This is put out by a fellow Reb David Goldstein from New York. Then he seems to be a son-in-law of Reb Belsky, so he has Hagoyis and the Ksav Yad of Reb Belsky on the side of a Shulchan Aruch. He has shiurim that he gave in the sugyas relating to Kedushin, the Parakama Kedushin, the Chelik shiurim are in here. And then he has all different stories and anhagas that he collected on Kibbur Aveim. This looks like a massive encyclopedic work on Kibbur Aveim. Just the index alone of the Sefer is 30 pages, including an index of all the sugyas and Kedushin where he deals with all the stuff. So it's very, very useful. It just came out a few weeks ago. It's available already in America for purchase. That's a work that I wanted to highlight, and it relates to Masechtas Kedushin for the few blot of Masechta that relate to Kibbur Aveim.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sefer. Interesting topic to learn and enjoy. Very relevant today for people of all ages. We appreciate Rabbi Brot. Fascinating. I don't know when you had time to even look at the names of all those farm that you mentioned and the other hundreds that you didn't mention. If anybody wants any of the PDFs that Rabbi Brot mentioned, please send them an email, eliezerbrot@gmail.com. You can email me, Schwedm, SCHWEDM @OU.org. Once again, we thank our sponsors and the dedications in memory of Moshe ben Elio and Aaron ben Elio. And if anybody would like to reach out about other dedications and opportunities, feel free. And with that, we wish you a wonderful day.